This is one of the longest and loudest debates in modern history, a conflict that outlived revolutions, toppled empires, bankrupted superpowers, and split the world in two. For more than a century, capitalism and socialism were not merely economic theories. They were front lines so sharp that living without choosing a side was almost impossible. Behind nationalist speeches, worker uprisings, economic crises, and proxy wars, this debate was always present, and the world we live in today is largely the product of that confrontation. Yet there is a truth ideological storytellers rarely admit. No system ever worked as promised in the textbooks, not once and not in any country. When conditions were stable, everything appeared functional, but when pressure arrived, war, famine, inflation, collapse, the illusion faded and reality was exposed. This story begins long before the words capitalism or socialism were ever spoken. For most of human history, there was no economy in the modern sense, only survival. Kings ruled by divine right, landowners held absolute power, and peasants produced just enough to avoid starvation. Progress was nearly frozen, and for thousands of years, life functioned as a zero-sum game. If someone rose, someone else had to fall. Wealth came from land, labor, and war. Productivity barely increased, and the idea that ordinary people could become rich through trade or innovation sounded absurd. Everything changed with the Industrial Revolution. In the late 1700s, Britain became a pressure cooker of coal, iron, capital, and suppressed ambition. Machines replaced muscle, factories absorbed workshops, and an entirely new force emerged: private capital. For the first time, ordinary individuals could invest, take risks, and accumulate wealth on a scale once reserved for kings. Productivity exploded, living standards improved for some, and misery deepened for others. Inequality grew at unprecedented speed, cities filled with smoke, children worked brutal hours, and slums became breeding grounds for disease. Yet one fact could not be denied. As brutal as it was, capitalism produced more goods, more wealth, and more speed than the world had ever known. Socialism emerged as a reaction to this reality, not as a utopian fantasy, but as a revolt. In the mid-1800s, Marx and Engels looked at the smokestacks, worker riots, and factory floors soaked in sweat and blood, and concluded that the problem was not individual greed, but the system itself. To them, capitalist wealth was exploitation disguised as opportunity. If workers owned the means of production collectively, if profits were shared, and if production served human need rather than private gain, exploitation would end, crises would disappear, and rational planning would replace chaos. On paper, the theory was moral and flawless, and for millions crushed by early capitalism, it felt like hope. But theory once again collided with reality. Socialism's first major test came not in classrooms, but in the ruins of a fallen empire. After 1917, Lenin inherited a starving, impoverished, and backward country. The Tsar was gone. The old elites had fled or been eliminated, and a new system had to be built, almost overnight. The state seized land, factories, and banks, set prices, banned profit, and erased private enterprise. Equality and efficiency were expected to follow, but instead uncertainty and chaos arrived. Without price signals, no one knew what was needed. Without competition, innovation stalled. Without incentives, effort vanished. Shortages became normal, queues dominated daily life, agriculture collapsed, and millions went hungry. Lenin was ultimately forced to retreat, recognizing that without flexibility, the system could not survive. Yet socialism remained attractive because capitalism was far from innocent. In 1929, the system imploded, and the Great Depression exposed capitalism's fragility to the entire world. Banks collapsed, unemployment soared, and for millions the future disappeared. It became impossible to deny that neither capitalism nor socialism was as perfect as advertised. Then war arrived, testing every system in the harshest way imaginable. After World War II, outcomes mattered more than ideology. Numbers spoke, and living standards spoke. Capitalism survived by adapting. Socialism collapsed where it hardened and endured only where it merged with markets. Today, the picture is clear. There are no pure systems, only hybrids. Human nature does not change. It merely expresses itself differently within different structures. And history's clearest lesson remains unchanged. Those who adapt survive. This debate was never only about economics. It was always about power. And power, as history shows again and again, never disappears. It only changes hands.